doesn't belong in a hard rain, and a hard rain doesn't apologize for silk. This life is made of things that can't explain each other. Contradiction is the milk that feeds the whole machinery of the Mack. Soft hands in a hard world, warm voice in a cold hallway. The ability to hold what pushes back without losing what you built along the way. I wore a silk shirt to a meeting in December on a block that doesn't care what fabric covers you. The cold came in the door, I will remember the way the silk held warmth that December through. That's the paradox I carry in the doctrine. The softer the material, the harder the conviction. Silk doesn't yield, it absorbs and keeps on walking through every kind of rain without restriction. Silk in a hard rain, this is the condition of every Mack who ever understood the life. The softness is the surface of the mission. The hardness is the edge beneath the wife of everything he wears. The warmth is intentional. It keeps the room for reading what's beneath it. The cold precision hidden in the credential of a man who learned to smile and let you feel it. A woman named Josephine ran numbers on a corner where I spent 3 winters learning to be patient. She moved through sleet like it had warned her. It was coming, and adjusted unabated. I asked her once, how do you keep the posture when the block is wet and every minute's hostile? She said the rain don't know me, I'm the roster of every storm that tried to make me docile. I wrote that down and filed it under principle. The rain is not the problem, it's the mirror. When silk survives it, that's the pinnacle of making something hostile, something clearer. Silk in a hard rain, this is the condition of every Mack who ever understood the life. The softness is the surface of the mission. The hardness is the edge beneath the wife of every element. The image is an armor. It's a statement that the armor isn't needed. A Mack who flinches in the cold is a performer. A Mack who doesn't is a doctrine that succeeded. I've seen men switch to wool when weather threatened. I've seen men trade the silk for something practical. I kept the silk and I've kept it well weathered through every kind of rain. Tactical, the silk absorbs the rain and keeps the structure of the man inside it warm and undefeated. That's the whole philosophy before the rupture. Be so deeply rooted that the weather can't delete it. Silk in a hard rain doesn't ask for shelter, it asks for spawn, the kind it doesn't recognize the difference between a downpour and a welter of soft days. It's all the same behind the eyes of a man who made the doctrine out of both ends. The softness and the hardness running parallel. The silk and the rain are the same gold ring, singing at a frequency too cold to tell.
Some people carry blades in places you don't smell them, wrapped in something soft and sweet and close. And the most dangerous ones, the ones who never tell them, are the ones you pulled inside and trusted most. I kept a woman named Simone for 17 months running. She had the kind of calm that passed for loyalty, said all the right things, timing never rushing, moved through every room with something close to royalty. It took me 3 months after to find the ledger. She been sending numbers sideways through a cousin. The whole thing organized, methodical with structure, built inside my structure, not a sudden. Switchblades and perfume, that's how betrayal enters, wrapped in everything you thought you already owned. The cold arrives exactly when the fire centers, and by the time you feel the blade, you're on your own. I didn't rage. Rage is the response of men who didn't see it. I went quiet, which is worse for those involved. I sat with what I knew and let the logic sequence free it, and handled every variable with the calm that I'd evolved. Simone was gone before she knew I knew about it. I let her walk, I had the information filed. Sometimes the better play is letting go without it becoming theater, and I learned it as a child from a man who ran a block on Lenox Avenue, who said the loudest response is always the weakest claim. The ones who last in this life never tell the venue, they already know the player in the name. Switchblades and perfume, that's how betrayal enters, wrapped in everything you thought you already owned. The cold arrives exactly when the fire centers, and by the time you feel it, it's already known. So now I watch the perfume, not the posture. Watch the hesitation in a 2-second lag. Watch the way the eyes move when the subjects cross the threshold that they're trying not to flag. Everything is data, every gesture in the room, every pause before an answer is a tell. Every smile that lingers half a beat past what you'd assume is someone calculating what they shouldn't sell. I rebuilt the circle tighter after Simone, cut the outer ring by 3 and held the center. Kept the core to people who had more to lose alone than they gained from any information they could enter. Switch blades and perfume, that's how betrayal lingers, but the blade cuts cleaner when you know it's there. I wear mine different now, not rage, not fracture, just a cold precision underneath the care. Some people carry blades in places you can't smell them. Simone taught me that without a word, and every woman I have trusted since. I tell them I already know the song, I wrote the third. The third verse is the one nobody reaches, unless the first 2 verses got you through. Switch blades and perfume, the street still teaches, and what the street taught Simone, it'll teach you too.
The purple coat cost $1,400. It came from a shop on 7th that doesn't know my name. I paid in cash because the credit always hollows the image, keeps you tied to something you can't claim. I kept the receipt, not for returns, but for the arithmetic that never leaves the mirror. Every time I wore that coat, I felt the burns of 1,400 reasons to hold the structure clearer. Purple coat arithmetic, the math beneath the glamour, the real account that runs behind the image. Every stitch of luxury carries a hammer that strikes at whatever part of you begins to diminish. I watched men wear coats they couldn't pay for, wear chains purchased on an infrastructure of borrowed, and then stand in the purple, stand and pray for the life to match the clothes before tomorrow. It never matches the clothes. I run the life when the life is weak beneath the presentation, and the only thing that holds is the knife of death against the throat of every station. Purple coat arithmetic, this is the math that every Mack who lasted longer than a season had to face before the end of the aftermath. Does the life support the image, or does the image hold the reason? The answer was the hardest calculation, harder than the protocol, harder than the choosing. It's the question of whether the operation is building or whether it's just the life you're using. A woman named Vivian held the books for 2 years running. She tracked every dolly operation touch. She came to me in March with something cunning, a breakdown of the quarters, how much went to what. She spread it on the table. Column 1, the image, 1,400 coats, 300 Gator boots. Column 2, the operation, the margin, the damage. Column 3, what remained after all the pursuit. The numbers didn't lie, and neither did Vivian. The image had been running at a percentage that the operation couldn't sustain. And then she said the code is beautiful, but is the coat worth spending 40% of the margin on the exterior of a life that hasn't finished building its interior? I sat with that question. It was superior to anything that Solomon had said in all his lectures prior. Purple coat arithmetic, the math beneath the glamour, the real account that runs behind the image. Every stitch of luxury carries a hammer that strikes at whatever part of you begins to diminish. I restructured after Vivian's accounting, cut the image budget by 1/3 that quarter. Kept the Gator boots, they were the founding document, but the rest was trimmed to order. And what I found, the life felt lighter, not from losing the weight of the fabric, but from knowing every piece was right, tighter to the architecture, not just the dramatic. The purple coat stayed, but it earned its place in a life that could support what it was saying. $1,400 on the surface, fine if the interior matches every stitch of its displaying. Purple coat arithmetic, run the numbers before the morning tells you that the life is short. The code is just a cover, while the lumber of the life beneath it holds up every court of judgment that the street will bring against you. When the image doesn't match the operation, run the numbers, and the numbers will defend you against the cost of beautiful miscalculation. cause the temperature says so. The summer birds go silent, and I remember what it costs to keep the color in the zero. November is the test, not the summer. Summer makes the display effortless and obvious. November strips the warmth, and then the drummer of the doctrine has to play more rigorous. I've kept a full display through every November. I've walked in purple on a 19-degree morning. The cold has never once made me a surrendered version of the doctrine. I kept performing, not because I love the cold, I don't pretend to, but because the moment that the image folds for weather is the moment every man I work with bends to. The thought that the image was only held together by convenience, and convenience isn't doctrine. Doctrine holds regardless of the inconvenience. Peacock in November is the honest function of a philosophy that doesn't need an audience. Peacock in November, still displaying, still walking the same route with the same posture, still running the same doctrine, still obeying the principles that hold me like a roster of reasons why the cold was never bigger than the man who built his life on something warmer than weather. I'm the peacock, I deliver the display through every season, not just the summer. I know men who kept the image through July and folded in October when the block got quiet. I watched them strip the color, didn't ask them why. I already knew they'd mistaken style for diet, something you put on when the conditions favor and remove when conditions turn against the wearing. Style is sustenance rather than behavior, rooted deep enough to hold through every season's bear. Peacock in November, still displaying, still walking the same route with the same posture, still running the same doctrine, still obeying the principles that hold me like a roster. There was a man they called Leandro on the avenue who kept his operation only through the warm months. November hit and Leandro disappeared from view and returned in April like he'd spent the winter absent. I asked him once what happened to the doctrine when the temperature dropped below the image's survival. He smiled the smile of someone who had rotten foundation, said, I rest in winter, seasonal revival. I told him the pimp game doesn't recognize seasons. It doesn't close for December and reopen in the spring. The ones who rest the doctrine through those reasons are the ones who come back to find someone else is running things. Leandro didn't last another winter. He was right about the seasonal revival. The only thing that revived was the splinter that his absence left, and someone else's arrival. Peacock in November, the lesson is simple. The display is not performance, it's commitment. The feathers are the point, the feathers are the temple of a doctrine that demands you never quit it. Not for November, not for the cold, not for the block that holds, not for the years that fold into each other. Still displaying and older and colder, still walking the doctrine into winter. Still the peacock, not the swallow. I don't count love, I count everything else. Every dollar in the room has a direction. Money moving left means someone's moving wealth. The ones who lose do it through misperception. Mink coat mathematics, you learn it or you starve. Every woman in my circle has a number. Every number has a story and a scar. Sleep is for the ones who never hunger. In the ledger of the streets there's only columns, what you brought in and what you couldn't hold. Every shortfall is a lesson coming solemn. Every lesson is a story getting old. Count the weight, count the weight, count the distance between promise and the cash. The ones who miscalculate arrive too late, and the ones who never learned end up as ash. Ran the numbers with a woman named Celestine. She was sharp enough to calculate the margins. Told her every coin you touch becomes a machine. I don't run charity, I run gardens. She didn't flinch, just tallied up the columns. Said what's the rate of return on patience? I said patience is the tax you pay for problems before they turn from debt into vacations. This isn't cruelty, this is clarity. Every figure in this game exists to function. Emotions are a liquidity disparity. I cut through sentiment at every junction. Count the weight, count the weight, count the distance between promise and the cash. The ones who miscalculate arrive too late, and the ones who never learned end up as ash. What you wear is what you owe before before you earn it. Every mink coat is a loan from future leverage. The street will hold you to it. You will learn it. The only ones who win learn how to manage. I kept 3 notebooks through the early seasons. One for what came in, one for what went out. One for every name and every reason. Filed under lessons nobody taught about. A hustler's balance sheet, it's built on presence. The weight you carry when you enter any space. The ones who fail confuse their own essence with the outfit, not the mind behind the face. Mink coat mathematics, you learn it or you fall. Every number in this game has a reflection. The ones who count survive, the ones who stall end up being counted in someone else's set. Count the weight, count the weight, count the distance between promise and the cash. The ones who miscalculate arrive too late, but the ones who learn, they made it past the ash. I don't count love, I count everything else, but I count it with precision, not with venom. Every mink coat hanging heavy on the shelf is a calculation nobody else could fathom. Fathom, 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 fathom. Yeah. 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 The pimp game is a philosophy, not a profession. Let that land before you touch another word I'm speaking. Every man who failed in this life failed the lesson of understanding what it is they should be seeking. It isn't money. Money is the evidence. It isn't women. Women are the congregation. It's the discipline that lives in every sentence of a doctrine that predates your generation. Gator boots aren't fashion, they are scripture. Every scale a reminder of the reptile underneath the cold intelligence that frames the bigger picture of a world that bites before it lets you breathe. Gator boots gospel. This is how I open every conversation with a man who thinks he's ready. The ones who listen leave with something spoken. The ones who don't, they never held it steady. I've been walking in these boots since before the turning of a season that most men don't survive the entering. I learned the doctrine through the kind of burning that comes from touching heat without considering. The first sermon was delivered by a man named Solomon who ran his operation out of Upper Lenox Avenue. He said the Mack is not the man, the Mack's a column of principles that operate on what remains true. I was 19 and unimpressed by what he told me. Sat in his car on a Thursday in October. He said in 7 years you'll feel the winter holding, and you'll return to every word you heard while sober. Gator boots gospel. This is how I open every conversation with a man who thinks he's ready. The ones who listen leave with something spoken. The ones who don't, they never held it steady. The gospel isn't kind, it doesn't offer comfort. The gospel is the architecture underneath the glamour. Every hat, every coat, every chain is not the answer. It's the uniform of something cold or something stammer. Proof, you cannot shake it with a question. You cannot crack it with a shortfall or a season. The Mack's philosophy survives every recession because the doctrine runs on something past the reason. I know men who wore the clothes and missed the meaning. Thought the boots were the arrival, not the symbol. Spent their lives performing without the screening of a mind that holds the gospel in its temple. The gospel says, be the coldest thing in every room, not through cruelty, through absolute precision. Be the one who recognizes what will bloom before the flower makes the obvious decision. Gator boots gospel, and I'm still in the service of a doctrine that demands I keep delivering. The ones who find the philosophy worth it are the ones who'll still be standing come the wintering.
The pimp game is a philosophy, not a profession. And the ones who treat it as a job get fired by the game. The ones who make it doctrine, make it something past transgression. Those are the ones that history returns to say the name.
every hour was extracted from a calculation. Every calculation lives inside the power of understanding what the image costs, not the occasion. This coat didn't fall from a store window. It came from 3 months of correct positioning. Every fur is cataloged in something narrow, the ledger of the life that I've been conditioning. Men, see the coat and see arrival. I see the coat and see the invoice that it carries. The price of looking like you don't need survival. It's survival at its most precise and literary. Every feather has a price, and I can tell you the price of every feather in this game right now. The hat, the coat, the chain, nothing fell through without a calculation telling me the how. I've watched men spin themselves into a corner, trying to look expensive before they were expensive. Spent their early years as the performance, and then found the life was more than decorative and extensive. A woman named Delphine came to me in October, wearing a coat she bought to signal what she wanted. I saw the coat, I also saw the soldier underneath the fabric, seen but never haunted. I told her the coat is fine, the coat is not the question. The question is the doctrine underneath the wearing. She said, what doctrine? And I gave the first lesson. Every feather has a price, including the one you're bearing. Every feather has a price, and I can tell you the price of every feather in this game right now. The hat, the coat, the chain, nothing fell through without a calculation telling me the how. Yo, the second lesson came 3 months into a training. The image and the income are not the same equation. The image is the premise, not the gaining. The gain lives in the discipline and patient navigation. She kept a notebook, wrote down every number, every lesson, every rule, every principle. I watched her read those pages through the summer until the doctrine felt like something biblical. By winter she was running her section with precision. Had the kind of bearing that you can't buy at retail. Had internalized the doctrine past decision into something that the code couldn't derail. That's what the image is supposed to do for you. Not perform the life, but hold the life inside it. Every feather in this hat is something true about the cost of being what you've decided. Every feather has a price, and I can tell you each one was paid in full before the wearing. The hat, the coat, the chain, the whole tableau, a balance sheet disguised as declaration. So when you see a Mack and see the surface, understand the surface is the last thing that was built. The first thing built was discipline and purpose, and the feathers came to prove it wasn't guilt but pride. Cold calculated, documented pride in a life that costs exactly what it charges. Every feather is a bill that was denied. Nothing to the ones who count the margins.
"48 hours, that's the window that the streets allow for a shortfall to become a statement about character. I learned this on a January, learned it anyhow, watching a man named Marcus fold under the pressure. He had 3 days to make a number that he promised. Came up short by what looked small from the outside, but in this economy, a shortfall is a comment on everything you said you were when you arrived. I watched them try to move the margins in real time. Watched them make 6 calls to 4 people who didn't answer. Watched the 48 hours compress into a deadline, the kind that doesn't come with any second chance. Or 48-hour money, the clock runs without mercy. The streets don't run on sympathy or extension. When you owe it, what you feel is almost worse. The realization that the debt defines your dimension. I've been on Marcus's side of the mathematics twice in the early years when I was building. Both times I found a way, but not through magic, through decisions that I wasn't proud of wielding. The first time I sold access to a contact, someone I built 3 years of trust protecting. The second time I took a loss on a contract and ate the cost in silence, no deflecting. 48-hour money, the clock runs without mercy. The streets don't run on sympathy or extension. When you owe it, what you feel is almost worse. The realization that the debt defines your dimension. Marcus made the number barely on the final hour. I saw it in his eyes, relief mixed with something broken. The kind of look that tells you that a certain kind of power has shifted, and the shift is now unspoken. That look is what I build my circle to avoid. I don't want people in my operation running scared. I want margin, I want buffer, I want deployed reserves for exactly when the windows get impaired. So I run the 48-hour math preemptive every week. What's the number if something drops tomorrow?
more. Maintain reserves equivalent to 60 days of operation. Not because you need them, but because the corridor of crisis shrinks dramatically with preparation. 48-hour money, but I don't run on 48. I run on 60 days of buffer and then more above it. The ones who run too close to zero tempt the weight of the kind of pressure that eventually will cut it.
Marcus got his second chance, I gave it.
Not from generosity, from calculation. Men who've been through pressure tend to treat it as a permanent instruction in their station. 48 hours is a lesson, not a sentence. If you pay attention to the lesson that it teaches, you stop running windows, you start running something wider, something colder, something that reaches past the crisis into the architecture of a life that doesn't fold when pressure gathers. 48-hour money made me better because I learned to build before the crisis matters.
Every stable has a bottom. Half's the ones who know it, the ones who came in bright and left with something missing. Asked a girl named Yvonne when she was about to show it. Said bottom of the stable is where all the wisdom's living. She came in from Newark with the eyes that held potential. I saw the angles that she hadn't mapped for herself yet. Treated it like science, every move was sequential. Taught her every corner of a game she hadn't felt yet. But the bottom of the stable has a different temperature. The light don't reach the same way it does at the top. What looks like loyalty is something much more similar to debt that's been accrued and has no place to stop. Bottom of the stable, you learn to count the ceiling. You learn which floorboards hold and which ones creak. You learn that everything that looks like upward feeling is someone else's leverage on the life you seek. Yvonne kept the notebooks, 3 of them in sequence. I didn't know about it till she showed me in winter. Said she'd been recording every rule and every frequent reminder that the structure had a center and a splinter. I asked her what she wanted from a life that's complicated. She said, I want the part of it that doesn't feel like renting. I said, the only ones who own it are the ones who waited. She said, how long? I said, it isn't done inventing. That's the answer that the bottom always gets. Indefinite as the timeline of arrival. Every woman in my circle paying interest on debts they took out at the entrance just to fund survival. Bottom of the stable, you learn to count the ceiling. You learn which floorboards hold and which ones creak. You learn that everything that looks like upward feeling is someone else's leverage on the life you seek. I've been on both sides of the stable's architecture. Spent the season at the bottom reading every face. Now I hold the center and I give the same lecture that the one before me gave when I was taking up the space. The question every pimp avoids when he's doing the accounting: what does the bottom owe that never gets forgiven? Vaughn asked it once, I watched the pressure mountain, felt the structure creak beneath the life we'd given. She left on a Tuesday without the notebooks, disappeared into a city that she'd memorized from corners. I still see her handwriting certain types of looks in the way that certain women calculate their mornings. Bottom of the stable, but the stable still stands, built on what the bottom holds and what it carries. I think about Yvonne and I open up my hands and count the cost of every inch the stable varies. Every stable has a bottom. Ask the ones who left it, the ones who took their notebooks and their witness. I built mine on patience, now I sometimes doubt I kept it. The ones at the bottom taught me everything about fitness. Bottom of the stable, you learn to count the ceiling. You learn which floorboards hold and which ones creak. And sometimes in the counting there's a kind of cold revealing. The one who built the stable was the bottom that you seek.
She chose on it, yeah. She chose on the Northbound platform 3, a Tuesday in March when the tunnel smelled like winter and exhaust. I was heading uptown. She saw the posture, saw the degree of separation between the situation and then its cost. The choosing doesn't happen the way movies show it. It's not a back alley conversation with a shadow. It's a woman doing math, and when she knows it, she makes a move that looks from outside like a gamble, but from inside. From From her position in the calculation, it's the clearest choice she's made since coming to the city. An exit from a situation with no other station, and an entrance to a structure ugly and oddly pretty. She came and sat 2 seats away, didn't speak first. I let the tunnel do the talking, let the noise explain things. Watch me, waiting for the worst of her hesitation to dissolve into the plain thing. Cruising on the northbound, she made the count. She counted every exit before she counted in. She didn't choose me, she chose the amount. A structure that a life without direction couldn't begin. I've been chosen 7 times in 11 years running, and I've never once recruited, not directly. Every woman in this circle did their own accounting and arrived at the conclusion I was holding correctly. There is a protocol to the choosing, it's a covenant. The one who chooses sets the terms of the beginning. I don't speak until the choice has a permanent weight to it, until the hesitation stops it spinning. Maydeen chose on a Sunday outside the Port Authority. She been sitting on a bench for 6 hours running. I walked past 3 times, established the authority of someone with a destination, and kept moving. On the 4th pass, she stood up, said, "You don't talk much." I said, "Not to everyone." She said, "I know what you do." I didn't interrupt, she said, "I want in." And that was how it begun. Choosing on the northbound, she made the count. She counted every exit before she counted in. She didn't choose me, she chose the amount of structure that a life without direction couldn't begin. The hardest part of the choosing is the weight that follows it. The woman who chooses carries more than she imagines. I carry the responsibility, I swallow it, of a structure that must hold through all the seasons and the rations. I don't romanticize the choosing, don't dress it in philosophy. I know what it is and what the choosing means for both of us. I know the asymmetry that lives inside the economy of what she gives and what she's giving. Don't discuss. What I can tell you is, every woman who chose right chose with information, not with blindness. Every woman in my circle is a light that chose to burn inside a structure, not a kindness. I owe them the doctrine and the discipline, the protocol that holds regardless of the pressure. The choosing was their power, and what I owe within is holding what they chose at equal measure. Choosing on the northbound, she made the count. The train kept moving north, I held the structure. She counted every exit, then she found the one that led inside past every rupture.
exceptions, and exceptions are the cracks that flood the structure. I don't make exceptions, I make corrections. Early, quiet, surgical, before the wrong protocol. It doesn't move for sentiment, it runs the same on Sundays and in winter. The protocol was here before you came to represent it. The protocol will outlast every splinter. There are rules to this, and I made peace with all of them. I don't love the rules, I love what they protect and what they protect. It's everything I've built for them who came into this circle to show respect. The track remembers everything, the heels, the hours, the 4-inch click on wet concrete at 2 a.m. The pavement holds the data, keeps it in its paws like a ledger that was never made for them to see, only for the street to hold in reference. Every woman who walked this block is cataloged in the asphalt's cold and permanent deference to the weight of everything that ever dragged across its surface. Every drop of rain, every blood stain, every perfume, every argument. The track remembers what you call by name and what you thought you had removed without amendment. The track remembers the heels, everyone, every woman who walked it. The track is testimony to a life that doesn't end when the night is done. It ends when the pavement finally runs out of story. Yeah, I've been walking the same 4 blocks for 11 seasons. Watch the track absorb 3 generations of women. Each one carried their own set of reasons, and the pavement held them all without its rhythm skipping. Celestine walked this track for 2 years running before she moved upstate and left no forward in the dress. She walked it like it owed her something, like the cunning of the block itself would settle for the rest of what was promised in the choosing, and it didn't. The block is neutral, it holds you till you leave. Every footprint is a chapter, nothing hidden from the tracks, indifferent, permanent reprieve. The track remembers the heels, everyone, every woman who walked it. The track is testimony to a life that doesn't end when the night is done. It ends when the pavement finally runs out of story. I know this track by section, by temperature, by which corner floods in April 2nd week, by which drain gives way in the kind of weather that comes in from the east and makes the whole block creak. I know which lamppost went dark in September and stayed dark through the winter till the city replaced it. I know which store was open in December at 3 a.m. when everyone had erased it. This knowledge is the inventory of a decade of standing at the center of a block that keeps its records. Every year this track was written like a serenade in footsteps, and I read them all like lectures. The women who walked this track, they built it. As much as any concrete crew that poured the surface, every hour of their walking is embedded in its grit and gives the block its weight, its texture, and its purpose. The track remembers the heels long after the women who wore them have moved to different blocks. Long after the laughter and the after of every night dissolves into the dock of memory. The track remains the document that holds the life complete and uncensored. The heels are gone, but the track's acknowledgement of every woman who walked it stays tenured. And I walk it still, the only constant variable in a block that cycle through 4 sets of everything. My boots leave marks that feel both bearable and permanent. The track absorbs the offering. The game chose me before I chose the game. That's the sentence nobody warns you about. I came in wearing a borrowed coat and a borrowed name. Walked in the rooms that had no exits going out. I read the air before I read a room. Counted every watch before I counted every man. Velvet on the surface underneath the bloom of something older, darker, cold as contraband. They said you gotta dress the part before you play it. Gotta speak the language before you learn the words. So I pressed the crease, kept the voice steady, didn't say it. Just walked in and everybody heard. This
nobody claps. This is the moment before the moment starts. Learn to read the silence in the gaps. Velvet and Venom, running through these parts. Studied every hustler that I ever watched move. Took the ones who fell and found them under lessons. Took the ones still standing and I copied every groove. Kept my own additions, kept my own possessions. Corner man named Theo said the first rule's patience. Said the second rule is never need anything out loud. Said the third rule is there are only two stations. You're the one being counted or you're in the crowd. I chose a different frequency, something cold and patient. Learn to look expensive when the pockets echo thin. Velvet on the posture, iron in the cadence. Let them wonder what was underneath the skin. This is the entrance, nobody claps. This is the moment before the moment starts. Learn to read the silence in the gaps. Velvet and Venom, running through these parts. When the lobby's full of players, I don't rush to introduce. I let the room adjust to something they don't recognize. Yet every pimp who ever lost did it chasing short-term juice. I'm playing longer hands, not losing sleep on smaller debts. The game will take your peace before your money. The game will take your peace before your pride. Everything about this life is cold and not quite funny. Velvet on the outside, Venom locked aside. Remember every doorman, every face that held the door. Remember who was watching when you walked in with the vision. The ones who didn't nod, they're the ones to watch out for. Be the last man standing through the clearest kind of precision. And this is the entrance, nobody claps. This is the moment before the moment starts. Learn to read the silence in the gaps. Velvet and Venom, this is how it starts. The game chose me before I chose the game. That's the same session in every choice I make. I didn't come to play it, I came to change the frame. The velvet is the surface, the venom is the stake.
Long enough, now I'm preaching to every man who thought the game was something casual. Every lesson that you slept on, I've been reaching. The kind of clarity that doesn't come gradual. This is the sermon that the street don't give you gently. This is the truth you couldn't hear when things were quiet. Now the walls are close enough, I'm speaking plainly. The velvet's gone, what's left is the riot. Every pimp who fell to one of three things. Ego before protocol, sentiment before structure. Or the moment that the confidence it brings got confused with the protection that it murders. Venom Sermon, hear it without flinching. This is not the message that you came here wanting. This is not the warmth you felt when you were inching toward a life you thought would stop the haunting. Venom Sermon, take it or be taken. In this game there is no comfortable middle. You're either building, holding, or you're shaken by the weight of every answer to your riddle. I watched 40 men enter this profession thinking charm was capital and style was currency. 40 men and not one held the lesson past the point of their first real emergency. The ones who lasted understood one thing: the game is not impressed by your aesthetics. It measures what you do when the alarm starts ringing at 3 a.m. with nothing but the mathematics. Venom Sermon, hear it without flinching. This is not the message that you came here wanting. This is not the warmth you felt when you were inching toward a life you thought would stop the haunting. Venom Sermon, take it or be taken. In this game there is no comfortable middle. You're either building, holding, or you're shaken by the weight of every answer to your riddle.
The sermon isn't comfortable, it was never meant to be. It comes from every year watching good men fold. It comes from every night I spent in the geometry of choices that the light of morning made feel cold. I'm not here to make you comfortable, I'm here to make you last. I'm not here to be the one who holds your hand through crisis. I'm here to be the voice that hits you like the blast of winter when you open the door that's open nicely.
There's a cost to every corner that you claim. There's a tax on every hour that you're running. The ones who don't acknowledge it, they came into this life and left it before the morning.
The venom is the sermon, not the threat. It's what protects the structure when the velvet fails. The ones who only love the velvet, they forget that underneath the softness there are nails. Venom Sermon, one last time receive it. I built this whole operation on its doctrine. Every rule I gave you, now you see it. Working in the dark the way I designed the lock. And the game will take you early if you love it too easy. The game will keep you longer if you fear it right. The only men who last are the ones who read it, not in daylight, but in the middle of the night. Venom Sermon, it's all I have to give you. It's all I have that's real enough to matter. I kept the velvet long enough to live through. Now I'm handing you the truth before it shatters.
I said the pimp game is a philosophy, not a profession. And I meant it when I said it standing at the entrance. But I've been running this doctrine through 11 sessions of winter, and tonight I carry a different sentence. What the boots carried home tonight is heavier than 1,400 purple coats combined. Heavier than the doctrine, heavier than the barrier I built between the image and the mind. The boots carry home the choosing on the Northbound, and every choosing after each one cataloged. And a part of me the track has never found, even with all the data that it's indexed and it's logged. The boots carried home the lecture I gave Delphine in October, and the look on Nadine's face when she chose on the platform what it meant between the choice and the arrival at this place. What the boots carried home tonight I'm counting. Not the money, not the coats, not the philosophy. Something older, something that's been mounting since the 1st November I kept the display for free. The pimp game is a philosophy, not a profession. And the philosophy outlasts the profession, but not the man who held it. I know this now the way you know a lesson that only reveals itself when you have lived it. The boots carry home. It's not the doctrine, it's the weight beneath the doctrine. The specific texture of 11 years of walking in the cold. The locked in knowledge of the exit that I gave in the last lecture. Solomon gave me the gospel on a Thursday. In October in a car run up a Lennox, I gave it back to men who came on a Tuesday on platforms and on corners. And the index of everything I taught is still out walking on blocks that I'm not standing on tonight. The doctrine doesn't need me, it goes talking through every man who heard it and held it right. What the boots carried home is something Solomon warned me about once, not in so many words. He said the longest running operations, the column that survives, is always what the doctrine heard from the man who ran it at its origin. Before the image hardened in the armor, before the philosophy became the discipline, and the discipline became the farmer of a life that grew too structured to remember why the structure was erected in the first morning. I didn't understand it then, it was November, but tonight I feel the truth of every warning. What the boots carried home is not the fur coat, it's not the Gator leather or the purple, it's not the money or the track or the remote possibility of something past the circle. What the boots carried home is smaller. A Tuesday in March, a woman on a platform counting exits, making the calculation shorter than the life that followed it, performing what she calculated and what I calculated through 11 winters, 11 Novembers, every choosing honored and recorded in the doctrine's cold and unforgiving ledgers. The pimp game is a philosophy, not a profession, and the philosophy outlasts the profession, but not the man. I am the man, and tonight the boots are teaching me the only lesson the doctrine couldn't plan. The doctrine lives, the man goes home, the boots set by the door, heavy with the carry and the coat on the hook. The night alone, the philosophy's still running, and the man is varying from it now, by age, by weight, by season, by the understanding that the exit is the wisdom that I gave in the last lecture for a reason, cause I needed someone to give it before the system of the doctrine gave it to me cold and without warning at 4 a.m. in Gator boots on an empty block. This is what the boots carried home this morning, the philosophy of a man who needs to stop.
The coroner doesn't judge, he just arrives with the clipboard in the quiet of the process. I've seen 3 men I knew end up as files in a system that reduces you to progress. Notes on a case that closes with a number, a reference code that buries all the context. No record of the years they spent in thunder, building something that the system couldn't index. First one was a man they called preacher on the avenue. We ran his operation like religion, cold and certain, till the night the one he trusted most came through and pulled the operation down behind the the call that ends the version of yourself that lived inside the game. That's the critical understanding. Death is also what you felt. Second one was younger, went by Cassius, tried to run the game without a protocol. Had style in abundance, had no practice in the discipline that keeps the protocol from fall. I tried to reach him twice in the month before it happened. Watched him make decisions that I cataloged as terminal. He had the swagger, but it never mapped it to the architecture, just a ceremonial. The coroner called his mother on a Friday. I heard about it through the network secondhand. I sat with it a while, then cleared my work day and spent an hour counting what I hadn't planned. The last coroner call, it doesn't come with warning. It comes dressed as an ordinary evening. The last coroner call is most of all the morning after every night you spend believing. The last coroner call is what I build against. Every protocol, every rule, every layer is a wall between myself and the events that turned a man I knew into a case number and a prey. I don't grieve the way that other people grieve it. I grieve through reconfiguration, tighter systems. I grieve through every lesson that I weave it into the infrastructure, not the schisms. The third man was different, I won't name him. He's still alive and operating somewhere in this city. I saw his trajectory and tried to claim him for the kind of life that doesn't end in pity. He turned me down, said he had his own protocol. I said every man who builds alone eventually discovers that his protocol is not enough to call on when the pressure hits, and it hits eventually. He smiled, the smile of someone who already knew but had decided that the knowing wasn't worth the changing. I walked away and I hope he pulls through. I hope his protocol is stronger than my ranges. Coroner call, it doesn't come with warning. It comes dressed as an ordinary evening. I have built everything I have to fight that morning. Stay on the side of the living. I count the cost so that I'm not the next count. I run the margins so the margins don't run me. Every lesson that I took from the amount of men I watched go under sets me free. The last coroner call is coming for everyone. The only variable is the timeline, and the reason I choose to make my timeline the longest one by running cold and clear
through every season.
Yeah.
This is the last lecture. I'm not saying it twice. Everything that follows is a test to your attention. I've been giving pieces of this doctrine at a price that most men pay with years instead of tuition. So listen now, the way you listen for an exit when the block is wrong and every instinct says to move. This is the last lecture, and I expect it to be the one that changes what you think you need to prove. The first thing I will tell you is the image is the last thing. The discipline is first. The image is the clothing of a man who's built the doctrine and the lasting infrastructure that the image is just showing. You cannot wear the coat before the character. You cannot walk the walk before the knowledge. Every Mack who failed was a spectacular example of the coat before the college. This is the last lecture, and I'm giving it cold because the warm version made men comfortable too early. The warm version kept men in the fold of a performance when the doctrine runs more purely. In the cold where you can't fake the knowing, where the block strips every theory down to practice, where the winner tests what the summer was showing, and the ones who pass the practice sing not dramatic. The second thing, every woman who ever chose you chose based on a calculation you can't take for granted. She can recalculate, and when she does, you lose the center of the structure. You both plan it, protect the structure, not with possession, but with the kind of consistent cold delivery of exactly what the choosing was. The profession of a doctrine that provides what it promised to be. This is the last lecture, and I'm giving keeping it cold because the warm version made men comfortable too early. The warm version kept men in the fold of a performance when the doctrine runs more purely. The third thing, and this is the one most never finish hearing, there is an exit to this life and it is not retirement. It is not a press conference and it is not clearing your reputation. It is silent, sudden divestment. I've watched men stay too long in this profession. Watch the life outrun the energy to hold it. Watch the doctrine become a confession of a man who loved the image more than knowing where to fold it. The exit is not failure. The exit is the final wisdom of a man who ran the doctrine long enough to see the edges of the map and chose a different system before the system chose a different version of him free. This is the last lecture, the one Solomon never gave me. I had to learn to exit on my own from watching others, the ones who didn't see it, the ones who stayed past the point where the doctrine had anything to offer. I'm giving it to you now because I'm at the edge of something that I can read the way I read the block. Every instinct is a sentence, every ledge I recognize as the place before the drop. So take this last lecture and file it where the first ones live, in the part of you that moves before the thinking. The doctrine doesn't ask you what you give, it asks you who you are when everything is sinking. This is the last lecture and I gave it clean, without the velvet, just the spine beneath it. The Gator boots are real, and what they mean is only understood by those who live beneath it. Go now! The lecture's done, the block is still the block, the doctrine's still the doctrine. The only thing that ends when teaching's done is the teacher, not the principle, not the option to live it or abandon it. That choice was always yours, the Mack only gives the map, you walk the territory. This is the last lecture.
And the classroom floors are every street that ever held your story.
I've been counting what the game kept versus what the game returned to me in some form. Everything that in it, everything that left, and whether what's remaining qualifies as warm. What the game kept, the first version of my patience, before it hardened into something I don't question. The parts of me that lived before the stations. A protocol replaced every other lesson. What the game kept, 3 people I can name who came in with a reason and left with something broken. Yvonne with her notebooks, the uncompleted frame of every conversation we left unspoken. What the game gave back, precision in the darkness, the kind of clarity that only pressure delivers. The understanding that the soft spots and the heartless are just 2 descriptions of the same cold rivers. What the game gave back, a life that has a structure, even when the structure is the cost of living. Even when the architecture of the rupture is indistinguishable from what I've been given. I came into this life with one conviction, that the game could be a system I could master. 6 years later, standing in the friction of what I built, I'm not sure what I'm after. The game chose me before I chose the game, and I never did get out clean. The game kept more than it returned the same, and when it gave me back, you couldn't have foreseen. And the game kept, it's hard to categorize. It kept the person I was at the entrance, the one who walked in reading every pair of eyes. Before the reading became maintenance, what the game kept is not in any ledger, not in Theo's lessons or in Mink mathematics, not in every protocol or every measure, not in the architecture of the systematic. It kept the moment before the first decision, when I stood outside the door, the way I taught myself and felt the weight of what would be the incision of a choice that puts a different version on the shelf. What the game gave back, the skill to survive it, the discipline that held through every rupture, the cold enough to function and revive it when the whole thing tried to fold into conjecture. Yvonne would ask, was it worth the mathematics? Simone would ask, was the protocol enough? Marcus would ask, what's the cost of the tactics? Preacher would ask, when does cold become love? I don't have the answers that we're asking, I only have the questions that I carry, and the understanding that the counting and the tasking don't end when the night turns ordinary. The game chose me before I chose the game, and I never did get out clean. I keep the ledger, but I've stopped reading the same columns that I wrote at 17. What the game kept was never mine to hold, and what I'm holding now is just the consequence of every choice made to survive the cold, with something left that still makes reference to the version at the entrance. Coat and borrowed name, who read the room before he read a man, who chose the frequency of something cold and patient and became the thing he was before the plan. The game chose me, and I survived the choosing what the game kept. I let the game keep it. What remains is mine, and I'm not losing. What remains to any version of this limit? What the game kept, let it stay. What the game gave, I carry it forward. The velvet and the venom both decay, and what survives is something that goes toward. Something I don't have a word for yet. Something colder than the game, and older. Something that existed before the death, before the protocol. Something wider, something bolder.
Let me tell you. Let me tell you what. Let me tell you what happens when the velvet rots. And it always rots, every surface does eventually. You're standing in a room that smells of what you've got, and the rot is under everything, incrementally. I spent 6 years maintaining what looked immaculate. The outer coat, the posture, the controlled delivery. And then one night in February, something cracked. The decision I can't name that changed the geometry. The circle fractured, not from outside pressure, from inside a loyalty that calcified the ego. A man who ridden with me past every measure decided that his silence had a price, and now I see it. When the velvet rots, there is no slow discovery. You don't find it gradual like paint peeling off a wall. It comes apart the way a building fails recovery. One structural flaw, and then the whole thing starts to fall. I was the last to know it from the outside, which means I was the first to know it from within. Spent 2 weeks recalculating every side of a structure that had rot along the origin. The man was Raymond, and I raised him in this operation. Gave him access that I'd never given anyone adjacent. Watched him grow from student into something like creation. And when he moved with surgical precision. It doesn't smell like what you think. It smells like everything familiar going cold. It smells like the specific texture on the brink of losing something you'd invested years to hold. Raymond took 3 people from the outer ring, not from my circle, from the trust that fed the circle. The information network, the referencing, the kind of thing that makes a reputation purple. And the worst of it, he wasn't wrong about the margins. He'd done the math and saw a gap I left unguarded. He moved with the precision of a man who'd carved his own algorithm from the lessons that I charted. When the velvet rots, that's when you meet yourself. Not the curated version in the lobby mirror, but the one who built the structure for the shelf of power, and now watches it grow clearer. I cleared the house in 48 hours silent. I took every layer of the infrastructure down. Rebuilt the center, smaller, colder, violent in the way that only silence wears a crown. Raymond never saw me coming back for the accounting. I don't run scenes, I run conclusions. When you've been betrayed by your own mounting, the response is reconfiguration, not delusions. A velvet rotted, so I burned the surface, stripped the whole thing to the frame and started building. Not from sentiment, from absolute clear purpose. A structure made of what survives the killing. When the velvet rots, let it rot completely. Don't try to save the surface once the core is gone. Strip it to the bone and start over cleanly. The venom was always there, now it's what you run on. The velvet was a cover for what I always carry. The venom is the truth of what this life requires. I wear it now without apology, not married to the image, just the function, just the fire. Just the fire. To a closet, then a storage unit, then a woman who buys it for 1/4 of its value. The Gator boots go next, and then the unit closes on a life that left without a manual. This is where the fur goes after winter, not back to the animal, never back to the animal. It goes to the second hand, to the splinter of a market that reduces everything canonical to a price tag, and the price tag never tells you what the fur coat held before it went to storage. It doesn't list the season survived November, 3 years running, with a man declaring the doctrine through the cold without surrender. Where the fur goes after winter, that's the question that the lifestyle never answers in the brochure. Every piece of this life ends up in the section of someone else's story without the hour that preceded it, without the calculation of $1,400 and the tools and the track and the teaching and the revelation of Vivian's arithmetic, the using and being used. The whole complete machinery is reduced to fur coat, good condition, reasonable offer, and the buyer tries it on against the scenery of a mirror in a shop that doesn't bother. Where the fur goes after winter, I know the answer because I watched it happen to the men who came before me. I watched Solomon's operation scatter into parts that someone else assembled slowly into something smaller, cheaper, something functional. Without the doctrine underneath the fabric, everything he built became instructional, not as a legacy, as a residual artifact of a man who held the temperature of a block for 15 years without a break. And then one season felt the pressure of an age that doesn't wait for you to wake. Where the fur goes after winter, this is honest. It goes wherever the life stops needing it. The fur was always just a seasonal promise that the man beneath was worth preceding it. I keep my fur coat in the apartment, not in storage. I look at it sometimes when the block is quiet, not from vanity, from the act of recording what the coat has held before the silence riots. Every woman who walked the track, the fur coat held their season. Every man who took the lecture, the coat bore witness. Every choice I made, the coat exists as reason that the choices were made by something with the fitness to carry them, not just to wear them lightly. Where the fur goes after winter, mine goes forward, not to storage, not to secondhand, not to the auction. Mine goes to the winter after this one. Ordered into service, still warm, still the function of a doctrine that I haven't finished living. Still the Peacock, still the Mack, still the structure, still the man who learned that all the giving is the only part that outlasts every rupture. The fur goes where it goes after winter, but the doctrine doesn't go. The doctrine stays. The fur is just the fur. The doctrine is the splinter of something permanent that lives past all the days that I will walk these blocks in Gator boots. Still cold, still calculating, still delivering the gospel of a life that keeps its roots in something hard.